Previously on the Genesis account of Noah's Ark, we resolved several questions as to how things could have worked on board the Ark by answering how drinking water, light requirements, ventilation, and waste management could have been achieved, all with only 8 people caring for the animals. Join us now as we re-examine the question as to whether Noah's Ark has ever been discovered, looking at 5 places Noah's Ark was claimed to have been found in Part 9 of the Genesis account of Noah's Ark. The discovery of Noah's Ark would be an unparalleled archaeological find. And throughout history, thousands of individuals have searched various mountains for the remains of this wooden structure described in the Bible, and in numerous flood legends from cultures around the world. Ancient reports speak of the Ark as being readily accessible to certain groups of people, even describing an annual festival that supposedly took place on a mountain slope to commemorate the Ark's landing. Similarly to how some in the past have claimed to have actual pieces of wood from the cross of Christ, pieces of the Ark were allegedly taken and used as amulets. In the past century, dozens of individuals have claimed to have located the Ark, many who were professing Christians. Most of these modern searches have focused on Mount Ararat, which is traditionally thought to be the landing place of the Ark, located in eastern Turkey near the borders of Armenia and Iran. While some of these explorers claim to have found the Ark or its remains, others are a little more cautious. They call attention to an assortment of evidence that seems to support their beliefs, such as pieces of wood found high on the mountains or aerial and satellite images that show an Ark-like structure. Despite so many supposed sightings and evidences cited from Mount Ararat, it seems unlikely that Noah's Ark has been found in recent times. And even though most Christians would be ecstatic if the Ark were discovered, there's good reason to doubt that it ever will be found in the future. Nor would it likely convince many skeptics who could simply claim it as a replica monument to a mythical boat or make up some other excuse to disbelieve. However, a serious consideration for Bible-believing Christians to reflect upon is that promoting supposed evidence for the truthfulness of Scripture based on faulty reports could cause stumbling blocks for others, either for believers wondering if they can trust the plain reading of Scripture, or perhaps unbelievers examining the Bible's truth claims. So it's incumbent on us to be honest with the evidence we're presented with and reject it if it doesn't hold up to scrutiny, regardless of whether it appears to support the Bible's history superficially. Certainly, as we've previously discussed, it's hard to imagine a large wooden structure surviving exposure to the elements for more than 4,000 years, and we'd expect much of the wood would have most likely been scavenged by Noah's family right after the flood, to erect shelters and to build fires, etc. Also, if Mount Ararat truly were the landing place, how could the Ark have survived the volcano's numerous eruptions, which continued until 1840? However, these factors haven't stopped the search for the Ark or the reported sightings of it. And this episode will focus on 5 of the most popular supposed locations claimed to be the Ark's final resting place. 4 of the locations on or very near Mount Ararat, while the other site lies hundreds of miles from this famous peak. Site 1, the Diripinar Site. Popularized in the 1980s by Ron Wyatt and others, this arc-shaped formation lies approximately 15 miles from the summit of Mount Ararat. Wyatt claimed to have found numerous artifacts in the vicinity to corroborate his claims. In the past few years, the Diripinar site has again risen to prominence after being promoted on several websites as the real Noah's Ark. But despite its Ark-like appearance and popularity, Christian geologists and archaeologists who would love to find the Ark and have visited the location have soundly rejected the Diripinar site as nothing more than a geologic formation. In fact, not just one, but several similar-looking formations can be found in the region, as a simple Google Maps search demonstrates. These formations are caused by mud flowing around eroded outcrops of basalt lava flows. Site 2, the Ahura Gorge. The Ahura Gorge is an enormous chasm on the northeast side of Mount Ararat. Dropping more than 1 mile from the peak of the mountain, the Ahura Gorge has been at the forefront of Ark seeker expeditions for about a century now. Interest in this location was sparked by the claims of George Hagopian. He claimed that when he was a young boy in 1908, his uncle took him up Mount Ararat to the Ahura Gorge area, and that they found something that looked like a large ship partially buried by snow and ice. He claimed his uncle stood on a rock pile and lifted him up so that he could walk on the roof. At least a dozen expeditions have explored the Ahura Gorge since Hagopian reportedly walked on the Ark's roof. However, to date, none of these adventurers have been able to find the remains of Noah's Ark at the Ahura Gorge, even though they've used satellite imagery and explorers have searched the gorge when the glacier in it has melted back. Considering the following complications with this story, it's very tempting to dismiss Hagopian's incredible claims as the imaginations of a young child. Firstly, Hagopian offered conflicting reports of his adventure. Was he 8 years old at the time, or was he 10? Was it in 1905 or 1908? Also, it's hard to imagine a youngster making this very difficult and dangerous journey without proper training. Perhaps the greatest problem with claiming this site as the resting place of the Ark is the fact that the Ahura Gorge is on Mount Ararat. As we've mentioned before, despite popular beliefs, the Bible does not specify that the Ark landed on Mount Ararat. It states that the Ark landed on the mountains of Ararat in Genesis 8:4. In other words, the Ark landed in the region of the land of Ararat. And also, this dormant volcano last erupted in 1840, and many much larger eruptions occurred during the post-flood ice age. In fact, the Ahura Gorge was largely constructed by an 1840 earthquake and the resultant catastrophic erosion. Yet even though these Ark searchers say the Ark could have slid down after the gorge formed, it still begs the question as to how a wooden structure would have survived being buried by the molten lavas which erupted since the flood ended and then traveled such a distance after that. According to geologist Dr. Andrew Snelling, Mount Ararat likely emerged from the waters of the flood far too late for it to have been the mountain on which the Ark ran aground on the 17th day of the 7th month of Noah's 600th year. We've already examined 2 of the popular locations of reported sightings and found them to be problematic. We'll now look at another spot that's caught the eye of Ark researchers, known as Site 3, the Ararat Anomaly. In 1949, photographs of the northwest side of Mount Ararat were taken by a United States intelligence agency. And in one of the photographs, a large structure can be seen jutting out of the ice and snow. This object has captured the imagination of Ark hunters because it resembles a portion of a large ship. Of course, this anomaly may simply be a rock outcropping with just the right amount of ice and snow melted away to give the illusion of a boat-shaped object. A satellite image taken in 2003 has breathed new life into the popularity of the Ararat anomaly. Presumably, taken of the same spot of the mountain, this overhead shot shows an elongated structure that appears to have similar dimensions to Noah's Ark. As far as we know, no expedition has explored the site of the Ararat anomaly, but it would be certainly a stretch to conclude that these pictures are definitive proof of the Ark's remains on Mount Ararat without additional hard evidence to help verify the claim. The object in the images may be nothing more than a natural rock formation, and perhaps that's why, in spite of considerable time and resources having been spent exploring other sites, Ark searchers have not been inclined to explore this anomaly further. Site 4, Ararat, NAMI Expedition. In April 2010, a team of evangelical Christian explorers claimed to have found evidence of Noah's Ark on Mount Ararat during their expedition there 2 years earlier, high up in a prominent canyon on the south face of the mountain. This group claimed to have found or told about 7 wooden compartments buried on Mount Ararat, which they believe were part of Noah's Ark. They even produced a video showing team members presumably inside one of those wooden structures. Although we would be delighted if the Ark had actually been found, this discovery is likely a hoax. This is not to accuse NAMI of perpetrating the hoax, but there's a real possibility that they were victims of a fraud enacted by a Kurdish man called Parasut. Dr. Randall Price and Dr. Don Patton were the experts invited to be part of the expedition, but they were never permitted to see the site and were soon dropped from the team. They've documented many of the inconsistencies between what was reported and what they found in their research. For example, pictures of an alleged room in the Ark provided by Parasut show straw, cobwebs, and a feed bowl, each in very good condition. The problem with these images is that Parasut had claimed that the site is frequently flooded, which was his reason for not taking the expedition there in the summer months. One has to ask, would a site that endured regular flooding remain in good shape for millennia? They also interviewed a Kurdish worker who claimed to have been one of several people hired by Parasut to construct movie sets on the mountain. For more details, you can read the full 52-page expose by Dr. Price and Dr. Patton available online. And finally, as mentioned before, like all other claims located there, finding the Ark on modern-day Mount Ararat is highly unlikely because the mountain is a dormant volcano and likely emerged from the floodwaters far too late for it to have been the mountain on which the Ark landed. Site 5, Ararat, Mount Suleiman. To reiterate once again, because the Bible states that the Ark landed on the mountains of Ararat in Genesis 8:4, many people believe that Mount Ararat in eastern Turkey is in view here. But the Bible merely places the ark on a mountain in the region of Ararat, called Urartu in ancient times. As such, it's certainly possible that the ark landed on a mountain other than the Mount Ararat. Having said that, a military veteran named Ed Davis claimed to have seen the remains of Noah's Ark during World War II while he was stationed in Iran. Based on his understanding of this report, Bob Carnook of the Base Institute led expeditions to Mount Suleiman, also called the Throne of Solomon, in 2005 and 2006 to explore an alternative site for Noah's Ark. Carnook provided several details about the site that he believes is a candidate for the remains of Noah's Ark. His team found rocks that were uncannily beam-like in appearance over 13,000 feet up the mountain, a worship shrine, and fossilized clams in abundance on the top of an adjoining peak. Carnook also points to the wide variety of ecosystems in the region and the 1965 rediscovery of the Caspian horse, believed by some to be the most ancient variety of domestic horses. Despite these assertions, there are multiple problems with the notion that the ark came to rest on Mount Suleiman. For example, the beam-like rock layers are likely a geological formation, the eroded edge of upended, finely bedded rock layers, according to geologists who have been able to examine the pictures. Also, it's improbable that Ed Davis's reported sighting took place on Mount Suleiman. But the biggest problem is that Mount Suleiman lies 250 miles east of the farthest known reaches of the ancient Urartu region. And as such, this mountain doesn't match the biblical description that the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. So, what should we conclude? Well, expeditions will likely continue to search for the ark even though it probably hasn't survived the elements for thousands of years. But Christians should avoid promoting evidences from questionable, unreliable, or unverifiable sources that may cause confusion or doubt in others. Regardless of whether it's ever found, we can be confident that it really did exist in history because the Bible has infallibly recorded the account of the Great Flood and the ark. Join us next time as we examine one of the most overlooked aspects of the great patriarch Noah's life and mission, and what it means for all people today and for all times. In Part 10, the conclusion of the Genesis account of Noah's Ark.